Deep inside Russia, the night sky turned orange as a Ukrainian drone found its mark. Steel towers, pipes, and cooling stacks threw ragged shadows across the steppe, a man-made constellation briefly brighter than the stars. On October 19, 2025, 0236 in Stockholm, the Orenburg gas processing complex, one of the world's largest, was punched in the gut by a strike that lit a workshop and forced the tap from Kazakhstan to snap shut. No air raid sirens for most of the world, no dramatic countdowns, just a sudden flare, a plume of fire, and a message. The war has come 1,000 kilometers beyond the front, and nothing this critical is truly out of reach anymore. The target wasn't a symbolic flagpole. This is Gazprom's Orenburg plant, a sprawling labyrinth of towers and separators built to take raw gas from Russia and Kazakhstan, purify it, and push it into pipes that feed everything from petrochemicals to power stations. After the attack, Kazakhstan's energy ministry confirmed the plant temporarily stopped receiving its gas. An interruption measured not in barrels, but in the sheer weight of molecules. About 45 billion cubic meters per year of processing capacity suddenly in question. Officials said the fire was contained, and the governor reported no casualties. But the footage, an orange bloom and black smoke snaking into the night, told its own story. A precision raid deep in the Russian rear that set off a very real industrial wobble. And Kyiv's military said it wasn't the only hit that night. An oil refinery in the Samara region took damage as well. Russia's Ministry of Defense claimed triumph and damage in the same breath. Roughly 45 Ukrainian drones intercepted across Samara, Saratov, and Orenburg, yet industrial infrastructure was damaged. In practical terms, that's a scoreboard where every shoot-down equals a radar switched on, a missile launched, a crew woken and tasked, and still a fire burning on a map very far from the front lines. It's the kind of math that looks neat on a briefing slide and messy in real life, where one missile to stop a drone is one missile you can't fire somewhere else, and those somewhere else's are multiplying. How did we get here? Ukraine's long-range strike campaign didn't begin last night or last month. From the crackling fires at Russia's Ust-Luga terminal in 2024 to a year of refinery hits that forced Ryazan to have its runs not once but repeatedly in 2025, it's been a steady, methodical stretch of the battlefield's edges. Then came the audacious raids on airfields, Pskov's IL-76 transport smoldering in 2023, and this year's spiderweb operation that slapped multiple bomber bases across 5 time zones. The trend is unmistakable: an expanding radius, a thicker flight calendar, and targets that are strategic not just to the war, but to Russia's economy itself. Each plume of smoke marks a lesson learned about range, payload, routes, and the seams in a supposedly impregnable air defense belt. Orenburg raises the stakes because of where it sits and what it does. Pull up a map. The complex lies close to the Kazakh border, roughly 1,700 kilometers east of Kiev. That's not a drone strike on the far suburbs of Bryansk or Kursk. It's a thrust deep into the logistical skeleton of Russia's energy system, a place that processes transporter flows and feeds a network of pipelines far bigger than any single refinery or depot. If this feels like a lot of drama over a fire at one of the workshops, remember that industrial systems are like orchestras. One instrument out of tune can throw the whole symphony off. Kazakhstan's confirmation of a halt in intake underlines the point. When a hub sneezes, the spokes flinch. So, what exactly happened in the small hours? The sequence, reconstructed from official statements and open source footage, is brisk. Shortly after midnight, UTC, local channels lit up with videos of a glow on the horizon. The Orenburg governor acknowledged a strike and a fire at a workshop, adding that no plant personnel were hurt. Ukraine's general staff, for its part, said a gas processing and purification unit took damage and described a large-scale fire, while also pointing to a simultaneous hit on the Novokoybishevsk refinery in the neighboring Samara region. A few hours later, Kazakhstan's energy ministry told Reuters the plant had suspended its intake of Kazakh gas due to an emergency situation following a drone attack. By morning, The flames were out, but the disruption and the message remained. There's a darkly comic line making the rounds. Turns out Russia's air defenses were on a coffee break, 900 kilometers too far from home. That's not entirely fair. Interception reports suggest the sky was thick with activity. Pantsers chattering, S-300s and S-400s turning on their fire control radars, electronic warfare units trying to bend GPS and confuse guidance. Yet, this is the thing about a drone war fought at continental scale. Defense must be near perfect everywhere, all night. Offense only needs one to slip through. Russia says dozens were shot down. Ukraine only needed a handful to do the job. What could fly that far and still hit hard? Ukraine has several families of long-range, prop-driven attackers, purpose-built for this job. The SBU-linked Bober, UJ-26 class, seen smashing targets in Crimea and beyond, has a reported reach in the 600 to 1,000 kilometer bracket, often flying low, slow, and quiet enough to make radar operators sweat over every clutter return. Ukrjet's UJ-22 Airborne, a conventional pusher prop that looks like a light sport aircraft from a distance, is credited with an approximately 800 kilometer range and has turned up in multiple deep strikes dating back to 2023. Think of them as digital cruise missiles at a fraction of the cost, swarming, redundant, and good enough to find a smokestack in the middle of Russia. In the last few months, attack profiles have stretched even farther, with some Ukrainian UAVs slamming targets up to approximately 2,000 kilometers in. The geography of risk has changed. How do you get past S-300s and S-400s that were designed to hunt fast jets? By refusing to play their game. Low-altitude routes ride the curvature of the earth and the clutter of terrain. Multiple axes dilute the defender's attention. Small radar cross-sections blur with ground returns. And most importantly, cost favors the attacker. A drone with a lawnmower engine and a shaped charge warhead can force the launch of an interceptor worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Do that across 3 regions at once, Samara, Saratov, Orenburg, and you start turning a national air defense into a very expensive whack-a-mole machine. Western analysts warned this would happen. If you stretch an integrated air defense system across strategic depth, you either thin the front or you leave the rear vulnerable. Pick your poison. The immediate impact is painfully specific. Orenburg's complex exists to gobble up gas from Russia and Kazakhstan, especially the Karachaganak field, strip out impurities, extract valuable condensate and helium streams, and feed the cleaned gas onward. Suspending Kazakh intake doesn't just hurt someone's Tuesday, it ripples through cross-border commercial contracts, threatens delays in downstream petrochemicals, and complicates the Kremlin's messaging that the home front is insulated from the war. Fires were visible from kilometers away, and airports in the region briefly restricted flights. Lateral vibrations in a system that hates surprise. Meanwhile, refinery hits like the one Ukraine claimed in Samara squeeze diesel availability and throw another wrench into nationwide logistics. Fuel for trucks, trains, and, yes, tanks. Ukraine has been methodically targeting those choke points for months, cutting into refinery output and forcing Russia to reroute energy flows. Now zoom out. This isn't just about gas molecules and refinery throughput charts. Russia's war machine runs on deeper assumptions. That industrial capacity is safe in the rear, that air defense can be concentrated where the guns are, that the economy can buffer shocks while the army grinds forward. Deep strike drones scramble those assumptions. Each new hit on a refinery, gas hub, or bomber base imposes a choice. Pull more air defense batteries from the front to protect the rear, or accept that the rear will keep burning. Either way, the cost curve bends Ukraine's way. The Sufan Center put it bluntly after Ukraine's previous waves. A more dispersed Russian posture demands a wider, more expensive air defense network, creating logistical drag on offensive operations. Orenburg just added another pin to that map. Let's reconstruct the night as if we're in the edit bay. Midnight ticks over to 0036 UTC. A waypoint buzzes to life somewhere far beyond the Dnipro. On Russian scopes, there's clutter near the ground. Maybe birds, maybe chaff, maybe something that looks like a small twin-boom aircraft sliding under the radar horizon. In Samara, alerts snap phones awake. In Saratov, a mobile internet slowdown is announced. Orenburg's governor posts about a fire at a workshop. Emergency services flood the scene in sodium yellow light. On Telegram, locals film orange clouds. One clip catches a strobing red hazard beacon on a stack winking through the smoke. A few hours later, the blaze is controlled. A few hours after that, a ministry 2 countries away confirms a pipeline of molecules is paused. Somewhere in Kiev, a mission control room with coffee rings on the desk updates a slide. Orenburg assessed, succeeded. And then the planners go back to work. What about official reactions? Moscow's line has been consistent. Brag about interceptions, downplay damage. The numbers shift. 45 drones here, 62 there. But the punchline last night was an inadvertent admission. Damage to industrial infrastructure. That's the definition of a strategic effect. In Ukraine, the General Staff called the Orenburg blaze large-scale and signaled the intent that's been written across refinery fires since late summer. Hit the war economy, keep pressure on fuel and logistics, and force mistakes. As for Kazakhstan, confirmation of intake suspension was terse, factual, and telling. When your neighbor's war sets a torch to your shared energy node, you don't editorialize. You count molecules and call the operator. OSINT filled in the blanks. Geolocated videos placed the glow precisely on the Orenburg complex. The skyline of towers and the arrangement of stacks are as unique as a fingerprint to the satellite sleuths who spent 2 years cross-checking coordinates. If you followed this war, you know the pattern. Nighttime cell phone footage, stills showing the orange belly of a flame, and the quiet confirmation that the plant's intake has paused. It's a 2025 kind of transparency, where the world's largest gas plant cannot burn for long without the internet noticing, and where a fireball that flares before dawn across the Urals shows up in your feed before the morning coffee. From a technology point of view, the tools are only getting better. Ukraine's engineers have iterated from one-off prototypes to families of airframes, cheap plywood and foam cruise drones, longer-legged composites with better navigation packs, and specialized warheads that don't need a gigantic blast to ruin a compressor hull or a refining unit's heart. The Bober's range bracket, the UJ-22's approximately 800 kilometers, and the demonstrable reach to 1,700 to 2,000 kilometers mark a maturing toolkit. Combine that with smart targeting, vent stacks, control rooms, transformer yards, and you end up with strikes that produce large flames but carefully avoid catastrophic mass casualty events. It's grisly work, but in strategic terms, it aims at steel and machinery, not apartment blocks. That distinction may not comfort everyone, but it matters to how this campaign is framed and sustained. How did these drones get through? Picture an S-400 battery, a very expensive shotgun built to swat fighter jets at high altitude and long range. Then imagine an enemy sending a flock of low flyers the size of motorcycles from 3 different directions, some with wooden skins, some deliberately hugging riverbeds and tree lines. Add decoys, add false returns. Add the defender's fear of wasting a missile on a bird versus the fear of letting a drone into a gas plant. No system can defend everything at once, and the 1% of things that get missed are always the ones that make headlines. When the Ukrainian plan layers simultaneous hits, like Samara and Orenburg the same night, defenders must play triage, while accounting for the political imperative to say, we shot them all down. Arithmetic wins. Strategically, Orenburg fits a clear pattern. Since August, Ukraine has ramped up energy sector strikes to raise the cost of the war to Moscow, without crossing the nuclear tripwires of overt attacks on civilian population centres. Analysts at Janes, CSIS, and others have described the effect: refinery outages, fuel scarcity spikes, and a growing need for Russia to shift assets, fighters, SAMs, EW, away from the front to cover the rear. Add cross-border interdependencies like Kazakhstan's gas flow, and you've got something approaching a pressure campaign on Russia's broader regional stature. If every night is a pop quiz for national air defense, each missed question is a fireball that becomes a morning headline. It's also a campaign fought in the currency of psychology. Russian citizens in Orenburg waking to a giant orange glow, then reading that drones also hit Samara, are citizens who understand, viscerally, that the war is not somewhere over there. Energy workers, refinery bosses, and regional governors become part of a nightly lottery they cannot control. That doesn't overthrow a regime, but it frays confidence, complicates planning, and forces officials to spend political capital assuring people that everything is fine, while posting videos of flames that insist it isn't. That's a battlefield too, a contested narrative about safety, competence, and inevitability. Economically, the metrics are plain enough. Knock a big plant offline for days, and you can sometimes do workarounds, reroute flows, dip into storage, tap different fields. But do it again and again, and tank farms deplete, blending components run low, and maintenance windows start shifting into emergency repairs. The refinery squeeze this year has already forced throughput cuts, export reroutes, and pricing pressure in regions not known for patience at the pump. A gas processing hiccup is a different animal than a refining bottleneck, but it lands in the same cage, a complex system forced to run while coughing. Let's talk deterrence by embarrassment. In 2023, when Peskov's Il-70s burned, Russia could dismiss it as a one-off. In early 2025, when Astrakhan's gas-chemical complex sparked gas cloud jitters, it was just an accident during restart. By mid-year, after Spiderweb, excuses got harder. Now, with Orenburg's intake suspension confirmed by a third-party neighbour, the credibility gap widens. That doesn't mean Russian air defences are failing everywhere. It means they're being forced to cover a chessboard larger than their doctrine was comfortable with. And every time they shift a battery from a frontline city to a rear area plant, somewhere on the front gets a little thinner. Ukraine is betting that a little thinner accumulates into opportunity. There's a human angle that matters too. The governor said no casualties, and that tracks with the targeting logic we see in OSINT. Hits at industrial units during night shifts, with strike points that maximize mechanical damage while minimizing crew density. It's still dangerous work. Firefighters and operators go toward the heat while others get out. But so far, the campaign's signal is aimed at steel. For Ukraine, that keeps Western analysts on side. For Russia, it makes it harder to paint every deep strike as terrorism. You can call it cynical. In war, clarity of aim is often the least ugly thing to hold on to. What comes next? Ukraine will keep iterating. Range, guidance, swarming tactics, more reliable navigation in GPS hostile environments. Russia will keep adapting. More mobile point defenses at critical plants, better radar coverage at low altitude, and a bigger EW umbrella. But Orenburg shows that the slope of innovation currently favors the cheap and the many. A long-range drone program that once felt like a moonshot now looks like a factory line. And if Ukraine can hit a plant that processes 45 billion cubic meters a year, the list of untouchable assets inside Russia is shrinking by the week. Smart money says we'll see more dual-target nights, more interregional saturation, and, on bad nights for Moscow, another intake suspended, another refinery flaring raw product it can't process. One last thought about geography and will. When a Ukrainian planner draws a circle from the launch point that arcs over Orenburg, that circle now touches cities whose residents never imagined the war would become a glow on their horizon. That matters for Kremlin strategy. Air defense is finite. Repair crews are finite. Investor confidence in massive industrial nodes is finite. The optics of calling the war contained while your biggest gas plant is on fire are, frankly, terrible. If you're the one paying for interceptors and overtime, each night like this looks less like normalcy and more like erosion. So yes, in the early hours of October 19th, a Ukrainian drone threaded its way through a thicket of radars and finally dove where it hurt. Yes, officials rushed to say no one was harmed and the blaze was out. But the deeper truth is that Orenburg wasn't just a flame. It was a flare fired into the night to mark where this war is headed. Ukraine has turned logistics into targets and distance into an illusion. From Orenburg's flames to the front lines of Donetsk, Ukraine is proving that no target is too distant when the war comes home.